YouTube has decided in its infinite wisdom that my usage of a 6-second clip of part of the intro of Charmed constitutes copyright infringement, even though I was using it in a review, is an issue. I now have an account that is no longer in good standing. Due to the fact that my account is no longer in good standing, I decided I would make a backup account just in case. So if any of you guys want to know where that account is, I linked to it in the description box. So just in case anything happens to this account, touch wood, you guys will know where to find me. I really don't think that it will lead to anything. I have gotten rid of any review that I had where I used any kind of soundbite of part of an intro or something, which is why certain videos like my Xena video is down now, but that's fine. I'll just redo them anyway. I wanted to redo the Charmed one before it got deleted to begin with, so this just works out in the long run anyway. I will probably use it to further an idea I had with Lady Kayla about us doing kind of like a little girl podcast, but like a female podcast of the two of us talking about different things that we like about fantasy and pop culture and whatever like that. So if everything goes the way it's planned and this account stays fine, that will be what that account is used for, like a podcast side account where we talk about different stuff. So I decided for this first review, since I had to just finish editing down my Byzantium review to post since uploading right now, I'm going to do a review of Neil Gaiman's newest book, The Ocean at the End of the Lane. I was able to see him while he was doing the book promotion for this book, and I have it customized, and he made me a little squiggle. He said that my name was cool. I have 2 other books that I have personalized by him, but this is the newest one. And the thing about Neil Gaiman is that due to him being a writer whose name alone can sell a book, whose name alone stands for something in the genres, in multiple genres, there is this dual anticipation and fear when his new books come out. It is this idea of you have such high expectations because he has led you to believe that he is deserving of those expectations, but there's always this kind of subconscious worry that he might fail. And while I didn't have that sort of subconscious feeling, I really didn't come into this book with any sort of expectations at all. I had not really heard of it before I was informed about the book tour. I didn't really, scope out to see what it was about. I didn't know his kind of emotional attachment to the book. And he said it when he was doing the tour, when he was speaking to us, that it was a very personal book. It did mean a lot to him. And so when I was hearing that, I'm like, oh God, this is going to be one of those books that you can either love it or hate it, probably. And while I was reading it, instantly I was engulfed in the story that I set up. And I think the other thing that kind of had me kind of daunting is that this book is only 179 pages of actual story. Yeah, 178 pages of story. So it's a short novel. So, could he live up to my expectations with a short amount of space in what is an adult book? Because it's not like Coraline, where it's a children's book and you expect that kind of short content pattern. This is a novel by Neil Gaiman. Will it hold up? And in my opinion, it really did in a really great way. Like, reading this book was a pleasure. I finished it really in one day, even though it might look differently on the Goodreads account, because it was just so hypnotic. The setting, the way he talks about his characters, the way the world is put together, just engulfs you from the very beginning and doesn't let you go. So when the story begins, we have our narrator, who remains nameless, who is 40 years old, about middle-aged at the time, going to a funeral of someone who's passed away. And on his way, just driving around town, he finds himself going up the lane to this old farmhouse. And as he's going up the lane and going back into the house, going up to the house, he starts to recall memories from when he was 7 years old, when a man's suicide prompted him to meet these 3 women and kind of started this chain of events happening in his household. And as he recalls these events, he kind of remembers the extraordinary thing that happened to him during this event. And I think this novel is so beautiful and so interesting because of its simplicity. The premise is very simple. In fact, in some ways you can kind of see it as almost like a revamping, re-emerging of Coraline, except with a male instead of a female protagonist. And it really starts about childhood, that kind of feeling of like, worry and isolation and knowing what you want but not being able to get it because you're small. That kind of feeling is very much ingrained in this story. And the mythology around it is also very simple. There are a few allusions to the Mother, the Maiden, the Crone with the 3 Hempstead women that the narrator meets and deals with during the course of his events. And I feel like what made this story very gripping was that you like the narrator because he fully captures that childlike voice without speaking down. So often in books with children leads, they will make the children either be very obnoxious and whiny or have them be perfectly stoic children who are not relatable in any sort of way. This book was a very good balance because the narrator was childish because, you know, when in the beginning it kind of hits up with him remembering the suicide, and when that whole thing is happening, he's talking about where his comic book is, if he wants his comic book. He has these musings about toast, how he doesn't like the kind of toast that his dad makes, how he wants a regular toaster. You have the kind of like, you know, whimsical childlike mentality, but you also have him being able to follow directions, understand right from wrong, observe things that adults cannot do. And I find that because they made him both a normal, they made him a regular child, you could feel for him and understand him in a way that I feel like other stories kind of don't capture, because they want so badly to either have this child be super special and wonderful or be like the worst child imaginable. With the narrative, it's not extremely horrific, but there are elements of like realistic horrific moments that kind of chill you. The description of one event where the narrator is pulling this thing out of his foot, it's such a cringeworthy way. The way it's described, the way you can kind of imagine a kid trying to do that thing, makes you like, I remember like just as I was reading it, kind of like itching the bottom of my foot to see if I could feel anything in there that was poking out. And when the antagonist is introduced, just how those events are so terrible, but they're terrible in a very human way. It's not like dragons or magic creatures, even though you get some ideas of that kind of supernatural element as you go further and further on. But it's so simple, and it works because you don't need necessarily to have everything explained. I mean, you don't know who exactly the Hempstead women are, what mythology they tie into. There are hints of it. There are hints of them being older than creation, about being kind of like original creatures, but it's not explained, and you don't need it to be. It's simple, and simple does not mean that it's weak. The story is very strong because what you need to know, you know, and what you need to go through, you go through. And I feel like the emotional journey was very satisfying, even though it was short, even though you know, it was very simplistic. There was nothing wrong with that. I can't go into much detail because, like I said, it is short. So if I go further along in the premise, you will be getting spoilers, and I don't want to spoil it for you. I think it's a really great read. I pretty much enjoyed everything that Neil Gaiman has written, with Nevermore being, in my opinion, his weakest book. But overall, I've loved his ability to weave mythology into it. He can weave it intricately, and he can also weave it simplistically. I feel like if you really enjoyed Coraline, and you wanted to see kind of like an upgrade version of that, I found that it was like a little bit more, like, I wouldn't say this is an adult novel just because adult tends to mean general audiences, and I think that this is kind of like a general audience version of Coraline. You get that kind of like, just like Coraline, a young narrator who you can follow, who you believe in, who you enjoy reading about, and enjoying them, seeing them grow and learn and being more capable than the adults, not because the adults are incompetent, but because adults can often see what kids can see. They know there's nothing in the dark that's going to harm you, where a kid may, you know, you can know as a kid that nothing's really there, but you still feel like something is there, and it makes you look deeper into the darkness than anyone else would, because you still believe in the back of your mind that something could be there. And so I feel like that this book kind of exemplifies and kind of personifies that feeling of, I know that there's no monster under my bed, but I should check anyway just in case there's a monster under my bed. So I would say, if you haven't checked it out, it's a really good read. It's a short read. If you're a fan of Neil Gaiman, you won't be disappointed. That I highly recommend this book. I give it a solid 5 stars, and I think it accomplished everything it needed to be, and I felt that at the end I was really satisfied with this book. It had a great ending, and you know how I am with endings. If a series or a book can end on a good note, I'm satisfied, and I was definitely satisfied with this book.